All right, let's start with a little experiment called Back Again. I connected with Victoria a couple of weeks ago at the expo, and ever since we kept connecting and commenting on different things that we're seeing, whether it was looking back and reminiscing on expo or if it was just seeing amazing things on LinkedIn. So we kind of got to the point that we would joke about our long messages being podcasts, and we figured we'd just give this a go. The main thing is to dig into our save folder of what we've consumed and kind of maybe forgotten about and revisit it. And we put out what we thought was sticky and what we enjoyed. And the conversation that ensued, I mean, is basically I have to delete her as a contact and get rid of all those voice notes. But here we are, we're actually going to share these with you live time.
I think that's a brilliant description. Please don't get rid of the voice notes. Okay, so I'm gonna jump straight in there with something that I found this week that I thought was really interesting. So it's Volkswagen, and they have launched essentially an integrated gamified metaverse experience. So essentially, this experience is so that people can go and hunt out NFTs on social media. There's 100 of them. But the gamified experience is kind of around safety. So it's around the safety features of the car. It was targeted in South Africa, I believe. So this is where like the campaign ran. And it brought up all manner of thoughts for me. So when it comes to the metaverse, I'm like, why? I'm always asking why, because I think, we're in these very early stages of infancy right now where everybody is creating something in the metaverse. And I understand it. It's a novelty, everyone wants to be a part of it, create something, put their creative stamp on it. So this is in no way a poo-poo of anyone's creativity. However, it did make me go, why? And first of all, for safety, if you're going to gamify an experience, make it about something exciting. I didn't think like the whole like safety thing, it didn't make sense to me. And I was like, okay, so even if this is about safety, are the consumers of the Polo, which is what this was about, going to be playing this game in the metaverse? Or is it maybe metaverse enthusiasts and people that are just finding the whole thing like a novelty experience right now? So I kind of think like I'm all on board with Web 3.0 and kind of like, this is exciting. There's so many experiences that can be created, but you have to ask why. It needs to be meaningful. Can we make this more meaningful? So yeah, that's what I found.
No, I mean, when you shared this with me, I think we both connected on that. Like, what are they doing in the metaverse? I mean, we've also seen Wendy's venture off into the metaverse, and there is kind of like a redeemable coupon after your experience. And presenting safety, it didn't make much sense. And I'd like to know the brief. But the main thing behind this is Ogilvy is behind this. And the fact that Ogilvy is behind it, it's either they put together all the best pieces early and really made it interesting, and it's a one-off lucky punch, or it's a masterclass in how you do this. Because I actually read into it, and this wasn't any model. This was the Polo that also is going to be launched in Gran Turismo, the game. So it's already kind of in a different universe already within the digital universe. And I wasn't sure if the hunt for NFTs was a gimmick, because you really have to watch the advert frame by frame, as they mentioned. And they were excited about all the user engagement. But is somebody going frame by frame really engagement? There's a lot of questions here. But at the end, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because actually they got the level of engagement they wanted. And in a way, they also delivered a real, basically a case study of how to use and explore and not monetize, but really productize NFTs marketing. Because they not only launched the NFTs, but on the same time, they opened up a marketplace for them. And I really understood that this was, I don't know how deeply people understand NFTs. I myself don't understand them very well. And now when you look at it, people kind of understand that NFTs are tradable. Yeah. So they may not be trading for money, but they can up trade. And it can be like that example of the paperclip. They may not end up with a house, but they're going to end up with possibly a really valuable NFT if they play their trades right. So this was a head scratcher, but it definitely, as all these things are uncertain and everybody's trying to figure out how to monetize these things, whether it's eyeballs or dollars, it was was pretty interesting that all will be pulled off, and it was very successful. Last thing I'd say was scarcity was introduced. They only had 5 days to hunt down the NFTs. So it wasn't a long campaign, and people knew that if they didn't participate and put in the energy at that moment, they were going to miss it.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing, actually. The fact that scarcity is such a driver, isn't it, to experience? Because you're like, I've got to do it now before. So I think that was very cleverly done. But yeah, it's interesting, and time will tell. But for me, I'm just kind of like, why all the time? But yeah,
I understand.
Why?
So, I mean, it could be a definite deviation from the metaverse. But then again, who knows? I mean, this was an interesting article from David Spriggs that he did in the journal Transparency, in the journal. Gosh, shoot, I lost the name of the journal. But anyways, his article is titled Transparency, and Spriggs I first discovered because of LinkedIn and Dorothy Stefano. So David Spriggs, together with Regine Schumann, they did this article, which was quite interesting, investigating transparency. And one just clear sentence was that transparency depends on the presence of light to shine through. So the article itself is interesting, but when you get down the article a bit, it actually goes into the process and kind of what makes David Spriggs tick. And that's what really excited me. It was interesting that he mentioned that he does explorations of the previous periods and kind of looks of what people did when they experienced a roadblock. And I like that for where we are now. You know, you're challenging to create something brand new. And the roadblock that he identified is capturing people's attention. Because with social media and just a distracted age with a lot of different things to focus on, art sometimes, I wouldn't say art suffers, but the attention given to art might suffer. So there needs to be a new viewer interaction, as he put it. So he had this really well put. It led him to painting with space or images that require human interaction. So as we're in experiential, it's interesting for an artist to really make it part of his paintbrush and his palette. And I think as he was talking with Regine Schumann as well, they said that, you know, they both kind of distance themselves from traditional painting, as that, you know, they find painting to be a singular experience. So in addition to what they're doing, absolutely fantastic work, they also, it reminded me of Rafik Anadol and his explorations of combining AI with just these amazing immersive, I mean, gosh, the canvas is a light way of putting it, because they're bigger than life, the canvas itself. If Pollock did it, it would be the size of a shopping mall, but it's actually lifetime is something to experience. So I really like this article on transparency.
That's really cool, and like interesting that you brought in Rafik as well, because I saw a piece, I think it was this morning actually, on LinkedIn, and it was talking about a piece of art that he'd created in collaboration with SpaceX. You know, and essentially, I think the name of it was An Important Memory for Humanity, and the piece was created using data from space travel. Absolutely astonishing, so beautiful. So you had the story there, like the pre-art. You've got that kind of, I'm seeing it as like, in terms of engaging an audience, you've got almost like a 3-act process. So you've got the kind of where it's come from, the art, which is the story itself, and then and where next, the kind of the end. And what was lovely about this was that I think it sold for about $6.2 million, but they took $2.5 million to put it towards children's research in hospitals. So it's that human element where everyone can relate to that. Everyone can relate to this beautiful piece of art. There's this story, and it's art for good. So it's art for good. There's a story, and I think that's how you capture attention. It's like a narrative beyond the art, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Gosh, I don't want to misquote it, but I think what's interesting is he's highlighted how AI specifically can be used for good. So I think Deep Bach was the first program that took AI and generated Bach's future catalog beyond his lifetime, and it disturbed people. But in this way, he's actually giving something that's more interactive, and in your way as well, it's interactive that it's actually generating charity upon that as well. So I'm a big fan of Rafik, and I think it was a nice anecdote that he brought.
Thank you. So the next thing that caught my eye was absolutely amazing. So in a chateau and vineyard over in France, Oscar Niemeyer, one of his pavilions, just opened within this beautiful landscape. So it's like a very cylindrical pavilion, lots of windows. It lets the light through from the vineyard all around it. And having just come back from Expo, I was like, this is unexpected. A pavilion in the middle of the countryside, because you're used to seeing pavilions around pavilions in these amazing high-tech expos and experiences, and then now we have this pavilion in the middle of the countryside in a vineyard, and then all of a sudden I'm building a vineyard a vineyard pavilion in my head. I'm like, well, what if actually you could take this to the next level? It provides an unexpected experience. This isn't what people expect typically, which is great for experience because it increases dopamine levels and memorable experiences. What if you were to create like an interactive pavilion within a vineyard? I can imagine like standing on the grapes within this kind of environment. I was like, this is kind of cool.
Okay, I like that last bit. I never thought about creating something experiential within the vineyard. Yeah. So that's quite unique. I like that. I mean, I did like this article. It's a great piece of architecture. As an architecture student, the history books that you evaluate, they always have the reference to Brasilia, and it's in a way dated for art. I mean, I was in school a while ago, and I would assume it feels dated now. It's black and white. It's very gargantuan in scale and kind of clunky in interpretation because it's very spherical and Brazilian. It's just very 1.0. Sorry, I'm really destroying Oscar Niemeyer on this one. But what I like is that this really is a nice kind of way to complement and then show the end of his growth as an architect and his final, I would call it a masterpiece. I really like how it sets into the landscape. It reminds me a bit of how IMK came out of retirement to do the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. And so I think, as you said as well, it's not, it's kind of out in the open. So it's not it doesn't have too many neighbors shrouding it. I think I remember Daniel Libeskind in Denver, Colorado. He did a beautiful museum, but you're hard to find it if you're driving by because it's just blocked by all the towers and all the buildings. So I think for this, it's quite exciting that it was in the vineyard. It also, as a pavilion, it has some of this energy and language of the Barcelona pavilion. But instead of being in Barcelona, where it's a city and it's grid-based, even if it's diagonal, it's a grid-based layout. This is in the mountains, and so with the rolling landscapes, it translated that rectilinear kind of skeleton into a new way that a pavilion can fit into a landscape. Not a lot of pavilions have curves like this and pull it off so well. So I'm a big fan as well.
It's so beautiful, and it also sparked something in my head where I thought, is this the way that we could recycle pavilions as well, where you create pop-up experiences within, so that they're not necessarily, I mean, this pavilion has clearly been designed for the landscape around it. It's absolutely stunning. But, if you could lift a pavilion from X location as a pop-up in these environments, you could test all kinds of things. And then you've got like position of environments and stuff. And I was like, this is quite cool. It's something that could recycle and create cool experiences.
That's brilliant. I really like that. The next one was an architect friend of mine, a guy I went to school with. He's now over in Japan, and he had this great article he shared about Japanese human-centric design. And it was just a really profound article. I started sharing it to some people within the interior space and the luxury space because we are at the intersection that this is very appropriate, that there's kind of a necessity for the art of subtle and implicit. And so, as they say, the Japanese culture is masterful at the art of deciphering human interaction and reading between the lines. I kind of like that. I mean, it's a very eloquently written piece. It kind of showed that also as digital technologies, as we mentioned previously, are kind of creating some disturbances. And then you have the post-pandemic reverence for well-being and health. It's time to explore the context that can lead to improved behavior and awareness. And so this is enhancing spaces. So it's always good for spaces to be improved and better for us to habitate, whether during the day in an office or at home. But this is beyond what you would think, because it also exposes different ideas in the way that the Japanese look at the implications of physical space. And they took it one step further, and they mentioned that these human-centric principles are equally valuable for also making strong, desirable digital experiences. So I liked that we need somebody right now to kind of say, really put some ethos behind how you're designing the digital universe. Not just that people can discover your NFT, but they need to be drawn to it, or the fatigue of wearing the headsets is not going to compensate or be mitigated by an experience that is better in the real world. So this is a strange way to look at it, but they have Yugen, which is the non-obvious or profound grace. The first thing I thought of was the girl with the pearl earring. There's a subtle grace to that painting. So I'm going to read here that they describe it as a barely seen mountain that is covered by mist. They might stimulate the minds towards an imagined possibility of elements and events that might lie ahead. And so this imagined scenery may be richer and more interesting than the one that is clearly defined. So it's worth reading this just the way they articulate it, but also that evokes a lot of ideas of what's going on in art at the moment and art in the past. And then the other term they mention is foromai, which is it just refers to subtle. And I really like this one, and I can connect it to art quickly because it entails the implicit repetitive patterns and models that often go unnoticed. And this is kind of like just driving in traffic, or the busyness of a city landscape. And for me, this is Philip Glass, his music, and also Koyan Naiskatsky. Everybody can laugh. I haven't looked how to pronounce that one, and it shows. But that movie, I think it was from the 70s. It kind of shows that beauty in the routine process. It would show factory floors with the printers. It was really just an amazing piece of cinema, together with Philip Glass's score, and it's just foromai in my eyes. So I really like the article. I would highly recommend it.
That's really interesting. I love what you said. Is it Eugen? Did you say Eugen?
Yeah, Eugen, yeah.
Well, what you were saying about kind of like the imagined landscape almost being more powerful than the landscape that's being looked on itself, that really sort of sparked my thoughts, because I think, in experience, I think I shared a post on this a few days ago, where we all come to experience from different perspectives as human beings. So we all start at a certain starting point. So it's very hard to find a leveler because everyone comes in it from a different experience. But when you're allowing the audience to take over that narrative, what they gaze upon, it's their imagination that determines where it goes. So they're only limited by their own imagination, right? So it's kind of a great way to move people at that scale and experience, because it's their imagination that takes over. So it goes from that art to their own narrative. So I love that. I think that's really interesting and very powerful for experience as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Really interesting. So my final one that I came across was, and it's a bit of a fun one, this one. So it's an airline, and they have created like striped liveries. So the exterior of the aircraft look like beach towels, which I thought was really interesting because, in travel, in hospitality, people use their experience as a form of their own identity creation. So, when we go anywhere, we're creating our own stories, and we're telling our stories digitally based on our surroundings. And I think that starts way beyond destination. It starts in the cab to the airport, it starts on the plane. And it's like, are people going to start choosing their methods of transport by how they look? I would suggest that they might well do that. And I think this is a real opportunity for artists to be able to collaborate with airlines, all kinds of different opportunities and collaborations, where it's going to make it more attractive to the consumer, because they take every experience to create their own identities. I just thought it was really interesting and quite fun. I was like, okay, like, where could this go and how far could this go? And what are those opportunities? I think there's loads of opportunities for artists here. So
I totally agree. I really like that it can be a way to locally express the culture, whether it's graphic art, whether it's, even script. I mean, there's so many mediums, but this is just very graphic in nature. And I do think it's clever. It's a company that is a destination bound airline. So it translates very well, and it kind of shifts your mindset to leisure. I mean, here in Dubai, you go to the big airport, Terminal 1, you see the tails and bodies of the plane. They're fairly repetitive, and there's a lot of them, so they're fairly repetitive, non-distinct, with national flags occasionally sprinkled in. But when you get on board, you have a suited flight attendant who reminds you of The Office. So they also said in the article that they were looking at ways to kind of take that kind of kind of corporatized culture out of it to make you think that you can kind of relax. You're already starting your holiday on that flight, where as opposed to being like, oh God, I'm still on the journey and I'm not quite there yet. So if anybody saw it, there's a Getting Past German Immigration post that went around on LinkedIn. And I do have to highlight that this is brilliant, that this is actually a German carrier. And so as I mentioned about the national symbol, the national symbols of countries and national flags, part of that Getting Past German Immigration is that this beach towel, this pattern, is actually the national symbol of Germany is the towel on a deck chair. So, it's a good link just to see that bit, but it also made me crack up that it happened to be a German airline. So.
Yeah, it's quite cool. I like that link. Nice one. I like that one. I think have you got one more?
Yeah, let's round it out. So this one is Proto interactive holoportation. So that is a mouthful, but it's just really cool. It's just well done. Bravo. That's where I'll start. I mean, it's something that's been gaining traction, but recently gained notoriety because it's gaining like some really high level endorsements and investments. But what it is basically it's just like a really beautifully clean, elegant life size. So I'm almost 2 meters, and it would be a very large frame that would project me as like a lifetime looking glass, or basically a hologram of me lifetime. And what I like about it is it was so well designed that the edges remind me of the smart frame TV, the Samsung frame TV, where it was a cool thing that it's so nice. It's not just a TV monitor. It's meant to be hung, on the wall. It's not meant to be mounted like a security monitor. And so that's the same thing here. Is they made it so elegant that that is a very good aspect of it. But then the technology, when you read the quotes, it creates meaningful emotional interactions unlike any other. And so there must be like a really low latency. It must feel lifetime, and it's nowhere close. I think there's also a depth to it. So where we're looking at each other in digital 2D, it really has a depth to the person and the edges, and really probably evokes a feeling of those people just being a touch away, which we're all looking for. But also there's a huge audience for this. I mean, they were first to market, high quality. I mean, first to market for this level of scale, high quality, and they already have a good level. I think it was Series A fundraising. But then the market from my side, we both kind of went in different directions, but the market's huge. I'm here in the Middle East, where as in anywhere, the boardrooms are amazing, if not exotic. And so this is definitely a complement to that. I also just think as simple as like a university with a guest lecturer. It's great to have a guest lecturer join on Zoom, but it'd be better to have it live in class than have that person joining like they're standing at the front of the class. And fitness and training, I could see a lot of that as well. But what's amazing is this currently is used by Christie's to basically showcase their NFTs that are up for purchase. So it's reached that benchmark of Christie's level, and I don't know where else it's going to go, but it's really going to be something. And it was called Portal, and it was rebranded, I think, just before South by Southwest, and now it's called Proto. But regardless, if you can experience it, I'm sure it's amazing.
That's amazing, isn't it? Like my brain went all over the shop with it, and I was thinking about like live events. If you could beam Beyonce into your living room, the future of like hybrid experiences with you can't get a ticket to a concert, but in some way you're able to have this in your own living room. I think that's amazing. I also think it could be a really interesting I call it pluses, like add-ons, or for that kind of premium customer at sporting events, for example. So you're watching the Formula One, and then you've got a private experience with Max Verstappen or whoever it is, where you pay that premium to have that interactive experience at that kind of half point, end point, whatever it is. I think it could massively transform sporting experiences and live music experiences in the home when we're able to do that. So I think that's
not too far around the corner either. I think it's really close. So
good. Cool.
So I actually queued up. If you want to stay on we'll try to go quick on this one. I wanted to put together the dots looking backwards. So we had 6 different topics, but in a way, even though it was just spaghetti thrown against the wall, The intersections on some of these were really amazing. So I put together some thoughts. I'll just throw them out there, and you can shout out when you want to add a bit to it. But like even the Japanese article and Volkswagen's Metaverse experience, For My Design allows people to enjoy unshared experiences that are exclusive to their location through a designer's awareness of particular localities. So in the Metaverse, what was also highlighted was that the campaign localized for the South African market with recognizable Johannesburg street scenes populated by avatars. So it's subtle, but it's just one of those things that you have to sprinkle that in order to make people gravitate towards that, especially in Metaverse, because then it's anonymous unless you make it more localized. So
yeah.
And then in transparency, in capturing people's attention, in competition with social media and just other distractions, digital distractions. I liked also with Volkswagen, they figured out a way to capture people's attention by embedding this NFT in a frame by frame. They said in the age of skip ad and ad blockers, this inspired thousands of consumers to not only watch our advertising, but engage with it frame by frame for 5 consecutive days. Like I said, it might be a one-off. It's not always going to happen, but that was one way to do it. So.
Yeah, and I think that scarcity element of that as well, like you say, I think that's had a massive part to play with it, didn't it? So yeah, it's interesting.
And novelty, obviously, might wear off, but we'll see. So the Japanese article on human-centric design, they talk about color and how it's a response to light. And so with Yugen, it's colors do not exist separately and independently within nature. They are constantly shifting in response to subtle graduations of light. It's the language that gives them clear shape. So what I liked was David Spriggs' work automatically captures this idea. I think it's Regish Soul is one that I really like of the horse. But he mentioned specifically that he developed this technique called strata chrome, which is layers of color. And he uses this in a masterful way. And he mentioned exhibiting a piece, surprisingly or not so surprisingly, in Suzu, Japan, which was called First Wave, where each color was slightly transparent so that you were looking at the depth of color through the space. So I liked how those two kind of really spoke the same language. With the Proto, they talked about they had this proprietary technology that made this interactive holoportation possible, and that this allowed a person to beam to a location in real time. But obviously, there's something special about the magic sauce that makes it feel alive. And I connected that also with the Japanese human-centric design that with For My Design allows people to enjoy unshared experience that are exclusive to their location. And what I meant by that is that it's exclusive to their location, which can also translate to live time. Yeah. And what I would highlight also on LinkedIn was this nice video of a Philharmonic that was performing with the canvas of Rafik Anadol behind them, and the AI was actually listening and generating it in tandem. And so that was just something that was nice to watch as a visual. And it also, for me, like I said earlier, it shows that AI doesn't have to be a replacement; it can be a complement. And so I really thought that was a nice example.
Beautiful example. I love that, and it connects the experience beautifully, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then I'll end with your example of the vineyard. And so coming back to Yugen and, barely seen mountain that is covered by mist might stimulate the mind towards the imagined possibilities of elements. This pavilion, with its organic curved architecture nestled, in the perfect, in the harmony of these surrounding vineyards and the provincial hills. And I can imagine at certain times of year, amazing mist. It just must be just breathtaking to just kind of take it in as a stillness and let your mind wander. Essentially, I think there needs to be more pavilions, like you said, but this one really is top notch.
It's astonishing, isn't it? It's so beautiful, but it caught my eye through it. It was such although it was complimentary of landscape, it was so untypical, and that stood out to me. And I think that is so important in experience creation now, that you do create the untypical, because we are surrounded by so many experiences and disciplines and art and everything that intersects. And it's becoming, I think I said to you before, it's becoming quite homogenized, the space. So when you see something that stands out and you're like, wow, it really draws your eye to it, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So it's complementary of landscape, but it really stood out as different.
Yeah, it stands out by not being loud either.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's good to have that balance in architecture. There's some phenomenal parametric design coming out that pushes the boundaries of what we thought was possible. But sometimes just a nicely designed pavilion doesn't need to be much. It kind of goes back to that subtlety, you know.
For sure. I love that. That was a really good rundown.
Fantastic. Yeah. So good. I'm happy that we were able to connect on this, share our thoughts with everyone. And we'll try to do this, you know, every 1 to 2 weeks and keep it to 30 minutes if we can. We'll see what happens.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Victoria. Ciao. Bye.
Thank you.